Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Rawson, and I want to welcome you to ISO 9001 Crucial Clauses, the 6 points CBs stress, but they can't say how to address. As you can tell by all the email, we've been pretty excited about presenting this. It's the most advanced webinar we've put out there, and we know that other companies are charging big bucks for this. I just did a survey yesterday and saw somebody who's charging $400 for a 1-hour e-learning program that, as far as I can tell, basically reads you the standard. So I'm pretty proud to put this out there. I know a lot of you have attended our webinars in the past, and we're just going to fly through this. I hope you have your workbook out and you'll want a copy of your standard. And if anybody comes in and bothers you, just tell them to sit down and listen with you, because this is going to be good. I have introduced myself to many of you before. And there's my smiling face, Karen Rawson. I'm the vice president of the Desera Group. And I've got a background in industry, but about 9 years ago, we formed the Desera Group, 2009. So 8 years ago, we formed the Desera Group. And I've been a consultant doing management systems implementation and process improvement. Most of my work has been in the telecom industry over the last few years, but I really work with companies of all different sizes and many different industries. I shouldn't say all. I haven't personally gotten into automotive, but we have people at Desera who do. We're a small company, and we focus a lot on giving very personalized, tailored experiences to our clients, whether they're small companies or large, and I'll give you some examples of those in a little while. If you signed up for this class, you probably have a stake in ISO 9000 2015 transition. For example, you're leading the project and you're going crazy because there's less than a year left, or maybe you're not sure what has to change, and you know that you got to get it done because other people don't have time for you to go back and redo something that you've done the first time. Or maybe you manage a business that needs certification, and you've been certified, and you're saying, this on top of everything else, why did they have to change the standard? What do I have to do? And we got to pass our audit on time because it's getting down to the wire. We do have some internal auditors. I know many of you are in those roles I just mentioned, but you also do internal audits. And in that case, you're probably asking yourself, well, I want to be the best auditor. It's not time yet to do the internal audits, or maybe you've already done some and you want a better understanding of what to be looking for. Well, you're in the right place, because we're going to be giving you some details about the standard that maybe you didn't go over in your internal auditor training class or you don't remember because you just did a single dunk in the sauce. And I've been studying this for a couple of years now, and I've worked on the guidance documents. And I think even an auditor that I talked to recently, a professional auditor, we were geeking out over one of the clauses, and we came up with some things that he hadn't even thought about. And some of those are featured in the articles that I've put up online, and we'll go over those today too. Well, supplier quality people now can hold their suppliers to these increased requirements of ISO 9001. So even if you don't have a lot to do with certification in your company, you should be aware of what your suppliers will be doing. And project managers, you're already managing risk for projects, and you're going to love this standard because of the increased emphasis on risk, where the people in the projects that you manage have to answer to the risks of those projects. Now, it's always been in there for products and services that are offered, but the new standard asks organizations to evaluate the business risk across a broader range than just the products and services themselves. So project managers, keep your ears out for that. And those of you who work with project managers, you might want to give them clause 6.3 to take a look at. If you work in a certified company and you're already certified, you might be saying, well, we're already certified, but I'll sit in on this and see if she's going to tell me something I don't know. What I hope you get out of this, if you're already certified or close to it, is some things that you can do in the coming year to build on the certification that you already have. And even those of you who know this stuff and you're listening along and you're saying, yep, I hope that you'll stay on the call. Or if you're listening along and you say, wow, I'm going to have to teach this stuff to other people in my company, stay on the line, because everybody who stays on the line till the end of the call will get a link called Talking Points for Management Teams. Now, before we go any further, I want to let you know that my project manager, Teresia Barna, is monitoring the chat window. You'll see on your chat panel on the little window that opened up when you open GoToWebinar, you can collapse that so that you don't have to look at it and it doesn't take up your screen. Or if you're looking on a mobile device, this is probably along the upper bar of your device, but there should be some place in there for you to ask questions. You can find the little arrow that says questions and pop that open. You'll be able to send questions in if you're having any trouble with audio or or not seeing the slides right, or just want some more information about anything, you can just let us know. Teresa will be monitoring that. And as questions come in, she will also, she'll feed those to me. She's sitting right here beside me, and she'll feed me questions so that I can answer them at the appropriate time or be sure that I cover them. In fact, I'm going to answer the first question that I know is going to come in because I told the guy to ask it. One of the things you need to know about your ISO 9001 transition is that you need to do a full system audit before you have your third-party auditor come in to do your audit. Now, for some people, that may be what the hardest thing is about ISO 9001 2015 is sitting down and making sure you've done everything right and are ready for your transition audit. But I'd like you right now to chat to me and let me know what is the hardest thing about ISO 9001 2015 transition that you've done. Maybe it's understanding what to do, or leadership, or risk-based thinking, or the nitty-gritty of the documents that you have to change, or the time it takes to get it done. Go ahead and chat those items to me, and Teresa will be keeping me posted, and I'll be looking at the chat window as well for those sorts of things that come in, because we'll be covering a lot of those as we go through this session. So the good news here is that you're not unique. If things are tough about your transition for you, everyone thinks their company's unique, but after my team and I have gone out and had lots of offices and lots of plants over the last 25 plus years, we've learned that pretty much every company has similar challenges. And I'll give you some of the companies that we've worked with over the years just on this. They all tend to be very telecom oriented, but we've got a number of other companies we've worked with as well. And regardless of where they are in the maturity of their systematic business processes, we find they have a lot more in common. You'll find, or I find every time I go in, that companies have a lot more in common with each other than those companies who say, well, I think we're pretty unique have. Well, it's our business to decode the standards and untangle the inner conflicts over what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. And so let me give you a few examples. One of the clients that we worked with over the last couple of years was an inexperienced client with quality management systems. And they said, well, as long as we've got to get ISO 9001 certification, we really want to use it to improve business. And it was a small business, and we did a blend of some on-site training and coaching, and then a whole bunch of off-site remote document review and weekly meetings and so forth to move them along towards ISO 9001 certification. And they found that they had the same kinds of problems that large companies had in terms of sometimes the right hand not knowing what the left hand was doing, or maybe focusing on the wrong problems to solve. But that was one of the kinds of clients that we dealt with. Our team dealt with a multi-site mature client who wanted to build on their strength. They were a client who has been certified to TL 9000 for a long time, almost since the beginning that the telecom standard came out. And that client knew that they wanted to use this time to do a little bit of house cleaning, do a little bit of upgrading, and they wanted to start early. So they were one of our first clients to learn about what was included, and they did a tremendous amount of internal training across multiple sites, a lot of collaboration across sites to really get the most out of this transition period as a time when the company would focus on quality management systems and building on their good practices. Oh, this was one of the clients. It's been a real challenge this year, and it's not the only one like this I've ever had. A client who'd been certified for years, and it turns out they'd been snowing their auditor. I could tell you, they didn't know they were snowing their auditor. Their auditor just didn't ask them very many questions, so they assumed that everything they were doing was just fine. The guy would come in and want to tell his stories about his World War II experience, it seems, or he'd want to know when the next meal was. So I called that company and others like it as certified in name only, SINO, right? Pay no attention to the business behind the curtain. And in fact, this particular company had a whole part of their business that they had grown, services that they were offering that they had never told the auditor they were offering, and he'd never asked about. Yet all over their website, it said, we're certified for everything we do. That was a company certified in name only, and it's a tragedy that a certification body would let a company, it was a reputable certification body with a rogue auditor who let a company get away with not actually getting the benefits of ISO 9001 for years. That's the kind of company that when they sit down to upgrade to ISO 9001 2015, they say, oh my gosh, we never knew all this stuff was in there. And many different kinds of global clients, large companies with companies with offices all around the world use this time to align their systems as a whole. And we've been doing a lot of that this year with clients. People who already have a lot of internal knowledge about quality management systems, and they want to beef it up. So they turn to the experts at Disera. But for all of those companies, for all those types of companies, the same things are always hard. For example, the clear leadership commitment, where everyone knows that the boss is behind it. Or just that everyone understands what to do. Even the leaders understand, and the project leader understands what needs to be done. That's hard. Having the plan to get it done. It's easy to procrastinate on this because you don't have customers asking you for how are you coming along on that. You don't have corrective action plans that need to be answered by a certain date to get your plans on track. That's one of the places where Disera goes in and helps our companies just shine a light on what needs to be done, when and when it needs to be done, and just having those status meetings is a way to make sure that you keep getting it done and you get those roadblocks out of the way if you've got an efficient project manager behind it. It's always hard to get everyone's buy-in when they've got lots of different projects going on, because ISO 9001 certification, face it, is just not that high on very many people's lists because they've got, customers and production problems and all kinds of things going on. And of course, it's hard for everyone to do the big changes. The stuff that actually has to change has to be done. You've uncovered a rock and said, oh my gosh, there's stuff underneath here that we really need to take a look at and get after because it's a disaster for the business waiting to happen. Or this is a big change in the standard and we're not exactly sure what to do. We have to do this. We have to sit down as a group and get this done. And the biggest thing is just the time to get it all done while real business happens. What do they call it? Changing the belt while the engine's running. Good luck with that. Business is actually happening all around you. And then there's somebody, usually deep in the grunt work of the quality management system, who's making sure that you're setting up the baseline systems like documentation and reporting and measurements and databases and audits and so forth that everyone has to be able to work with, and those things have to happen on time. Those things really don't change much in this version. In our previous webinars that you can find on our website, we go through what are those little things that don't change much and don't get all wrapped around the axle about them. But championing change is always hard. So if the people at the top and if the project manager start with knowledge and planning to begin with, it's going to be a whole lot easier for everyone else who's following you. And here's what we found as we've worked with dozens of companies around the world to make changes to their quality management system and other types of management systems. In fact, changes of any kind. What successful changes have in common, and if you talked about this with your manager, you're going to find that this is really in any kind of change that happens. It's generic. So I asked you a little while ago to chat to me, what's the hardest one for your company to do? The hardest part of implementation? Keep chatting those ideas in. Because I see these sorts of things coming in already where people are saying leadership. And they're also mentioning some of the clauses that are coming up. But I want to hear from you. What's hard for you to do? I said that if you stay around till the end of the to the end, you'll get this bonus presentation on talking points to work with your manager. You're really going to want that, because taking this webinar, the 90-minute webinar, they're not going to sit through that if you're talking about somebody at a fairly high level in the company who needs to make sure that they've got the commitment of their entire team. Those leaders need something boiled down, and that's what you'll have in that presentation. It's a PowerPoint or a PDF. The PowerPoint has the speaking notes attached to it, and your first assignment at the end of this program will be to take that talking point workbook and go talk to your manager, talk to your team if you're already a manager, and say, where do we stand on this? Have these discussions about how committed are we to this and what needs to be done. Another key success factor is companies who recognize they've got a knowledge gap and they get the information they need. In some cases, it's just a matter of going out and getting a little bit of training, or you've got experts inside who can study on their own and teach it to other people, and that's great if you're at that level. But other companies need some more short-term assistance to get the stuff done. We give away so much in these webinars that we do, and people say, Karen, other people charge for this stuff. And I said, let them. The people we want to work with are the people who are already pretty smart but need some work because of all the other important things they're doing. The do-it-yourselfers were going to do it yourself anyway. We're just confirming what they knew. It's the people who need some additional help who are our real clients. Another success factor is a plan. So you've got the leadership commitment, you've got the knowledge, and then you've got a plan that fits your business needs and resources. Are you going for a check-the-box certification, or are you going for an overhaul? Do you have one or two people who are going to try to do this for the whole organization? Or is this time, like I said, that one big global company that said, we're going to use this globally to do a whole lot of training and a whole lot of taking a hard look at ourselves? So think to yourself, what's the first step for you to make the transition successful? If you're here, there's probably something you intend to do. You may not be the leader of this transition overall, but whatever your role you're in, a project manager, an auditor, a supplier quality person, a member of the quality team, an operations manager, or truly a leader at the higher reaches of the company, you can be a leader by having the knowledge, by making sure you understand the purpose of the change and can communicate that to the people in your community, where you work. This is why we're doing this, and really be committed to making the changes. Don't wait for other people to lead you. Lead others along, and that's one of the ways I found early in my career was one of my ways to success was embracing change and getting the information and helping other people through it. And now what you came for. I had a lot of hype over the 6 crucial clauses of ISO 9001:2015. And so we're going to go through these one at a time. This is the time to open up if you haven't already and captured those critical success factors, open up your workbook and turn to the page about crucial clause number 1. Let's see, that would be starting on page 7, I guess. What I've done here in your workbook is I have cut out some excerpts from the standard so that you can follow along with me. But I hope you have your own copy open, and I hope you'll highlight these same pages because these are the ones that you're going to want to refer to when you're working with your team about what we have to change around here. So let's look at this. This is 4.1, the first shall in ISO 9001:2015, and I call it crucial clause number 1. It says, the organization shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and strategic direction, and that affect its ability to achieve intended results of its quality management system. And you have to monitor and review information about those external and internal issues. Well, there are a whole lot of words in there that haven't been used in ISO 9001 before. So let's think about this. So I'm going to pull out some keywords here. We're going to pull out relevant. We're going to pull out purpose and strategic direction. We're going to pull out intended results of the quality management system. So first of all, what's relevant? Well, what's relevant are those things that have to do with your purpose and strategic direction. So that's number 2. Well, here's the leadership tip. Some organizations haven't defined their purpose and strategic direction. How is that purpose and strategic direction decided and communicated? I worked with a company a couple of months ago, and I had 2 of the people who directly reported to the president. And I said, can you tell me about your purpose and strategic direction? And they both turned to each other and laughed. I mean, these guys reported to the president. And it was a small company. But their point was, well, it's kind of whatever the boss says it is this quarter. Well, how hard is it going to be to meet your intended results if the purpose and strategic direction haven't been decided and communicated? There are other companies who have global schemes of strategic planning and budgeting and quality planning and so forth. So find out how these are done for your company and be sure that these can be communicated because the rest of the standard depends on this. You'll see purpose and strategic direction again and again. That's why I put it crucial clause number 1. Then the third important point in here is that if what makes something relevant is because it affects your ability to achieve the intended results of your quality management system. So as a leader, you should be able to lead your team through a discussion of why do we have our quality management system? If people can't answer that in any other way than quality, cost, and speed, or point to those objectives that are on their bonus plan, they really haven't thought about what a quality management system can do for them. And going through that in a deep way is one of the things we do in our workshops and also teach our folks in our implementation program how to work with leadership to define purpose and strategic direction and communicate those, and how to get to the root of why we even have a quality management system in the first place. If the answer is because our customers want us to be certified, That's not getting you very far. You're leaving a lot of money on the table if that's the case. Okay, context of the organization said that you have to define and monitor the internal and external issues. Now, this is the point that I had the discussion with a CB about a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about internal and external issues versus the risk-based thinking that it talks about later in the standard. And he was saying, well, your internal issues are the same as your risks. And I said, well, wait a minute. One of your internal issues, for example, might be your business performance. That's an internal issue, because how the business is performing is going to say what kind of emphasis are we going to put. I mean, you're not really worrying about your on-time delivery if the building is crumbling down. If revenue is in the tank, right? It's one of the things they have to fix. But if they just lost a big customer, they're working on a lot of other things. Or if business is booming, they may be using this as a time to increase some training or to increase some capacity that will affect on-time delivery later on. So business performance would be an example of an issue that you'd follow that isn't necessarily a risk at the moment. Maybe it's sort of business as usual right now, no big risks associated with it. Business performance might be things like new product sales. These are things to write into your notes. I hope you're taking notes fast on these, because I tend to jump around a little bit, and these internal words are not really written in there. You got to take these notes about business performance, things like new product sales, your financial performance overall, your sales, not just profit, but your sales in general, maybe regions of the world that you're working in. Let's see, your sales by region is what I meant. Resource factors might have things to do with the environment you work in, your infrastructure, your IT capabilities or lack thereof, maybe the facility layout, any space constraints. That would be an issue you would want to monitor. Okay, you've been growing and growing, you have enough space now, but it's an issue that you want to monitor over time and update as it changes. If, for example, your space constraints or the age of your equipment or the demand for certain pieces of equipment, if you're in a manufacturing facility, those would be resource factors you'd want to keep an eye on. Another one might be where your customers are, where your suppliers are. If they move out or if they move closer to you, what difference does that make to you? Also, a resource factor might be if you're operating in one facility or multiple facilities. And then some of the human aspects, some internal issues that you want to keep an eye on, because as these things change over time, they could represent risks. So, for example, the competence of your workforce, maybe the age of your workforce, the culture that you have internally. What kinds of things are going on with your unions? Right now, if you have a union, everything's hunky-dory. Another year, it becomes a risk if you have a contract negotiation coming up or if there's dissatisfaction in some way. Maybe the languages would be a human aspect that you need to keep your eye on, because it could become a problem down the line if you need more people who speak different languages or need to do some translations for new products. And then the management-related issues. Take some notes on these. One of the ideas of a management-related issue that I always take a look at when we're working with companies going for certification and defining their internal and external issues is I ask, who's got the authority related to your corporate entity if you're not a standalone business, your parent company? Who's got the authority related to, for example, how you make IT changes? How does your organizational structure work? Right now, your organizational structure may be stable, but down the line, when you've had a reorg, that might become a risk that you take into account in your risk-based thinking part, as we talk about later in Clause 6. Just how are decisions made, right? Are they centralized at the top like that company I told you about? That would be an issue that you'd want to talk about. Or do you have a very dispersed decision-making process? Are you trying to upgrade people into some management roles? So I've just gone through a lot of details, and in an advanced class on this where we have more time, we'll dig into that and do some workshops and give you some worksheets that you can take home to your business to lead them through that. Now look at some external issues. When you look at external issues, think of things that were on people's mind at the times of the election in our country. Now think of things that were on the minds of companies who are influenced by the United States, influenced by trade agreements. Those kinds of economic issues are something you want to keep an eye on, and they don't become a risk until something changes, right? What are inflation rates? What are credit availability rates as financial markets change? Social factors would have things to do with, like, what are the unemployment rates like locally? What are the educational levels where your facility is, or where you want to be able to do business or make sales? What about holidays, working days? How are unions or other actions in the marketplace where you are? What's the public perception of your industry or your company? Those would be some external issues to look at that have to do with social factors. Political and legal, those of you operating in regulatory environments, dealing with legislation, you probably have lawyers and compliance people who keep you apprised of all these things. And they've got a checklist that they're going down and making, they're scanning those things. They may subscribe to services that will update them if anything changes. That's already being done in a lot of companies who work in regulated industries. If you're not working in a regulated industry, you might want to at least keep an eye on are there regulations and legislation that might come to affect you. That would be an issue you'd want to have on your radar that somebody's scanning for. And if it becomes a big deal, then maybe you put processes into place to scan more seriously. Certainly international trade agreements would be a political kind of aspect of an external issue to keep an eye on. Technology. Is there new technology in the way you provide your products and services? Using apps for services, doing things electronically that may have been done or technically that may have been done manually before. New materials that might be disruptive, new equipment. Look at any kind of market disruptions, any kind of new patents that may be expiring that you could capitalize on. And then I list competition. And when somebody's first, and I'm just such a geek with this. We were talking about this 2 years ago. The source for all these things, by the way, I didn't just make this stuff up. I'm not that smart. I went out and I bought a copy of ISO 9002. And all of us consultants within the Disera group have been poring over it. We've been talking to our CB friends, and we've been using it with our clients. ISO 9002 is the guidance document that gives you all these thought starters to think about when you're applying this. So you might put this in your workbook. You might just write ISO 9002 good and put a big circle around it, because it's got a lot of information for the do-it-yourselfers to dig into if you want to work on applying ISO 9001. But when I said competition, I said, what competition? They don't influence my ability to achieve my goals. And I'm like, uh-oh, Karen, wait a minute. Yes, it does. What if your competition suddenly gets some sort of competitive advantage for on-time delivery, or they get some sort of new technology, or they get some sort of cost advantage or disadvantage? That's going to put pressure on you to change what you do and how you do it, because the market expectations will change as your competition makes different changes. So they have an ability to influence your ability to achieve your goals. Not directly, they're not putting requirements on you, but you want to keep them on your radar so you know are there risks associated with competition. So here's what auditors expect to see. All of those things that it said in clause 4.1, and you might just flip back to it and see, I've just pulled out the key words there. Purpose, strategic direction, internal and external issues, and that you're monitoring and reviewing issues. So what you need to do, what the auditors expect to see, I'm telling you what you should do, but I want you to think what you shall document. And the reason I say this is that if you're not writing this stuff down, unless you're very, very small and very, very good communicators, a quarter is going to go by and somebody's not going to remember what was said. Now, do you have to document in a procedure? No. This can be in memos. This can be in presentations. This can be on websites, whatever works for your organization, intranet, SharePoint, however you tend to store that kind of thing. But what you need to document, and this is the Karen Rawson shall, not the ISO, but it's what your auditors are going to be looking for. And this is why I tell you, eventually I will finish a sentence, folks. But this is why I told you in the title of this presentation, it's the crucial clauses that your CB can't tell you how to address. They can't say how to address. They'll tell you you have to identify these things, but they're not going to tell you you have to write it down. I'm telling you, you need to write it down. So all those things listed there: purpose, strategic direction, issues, and show evidence that you monitor and review this stuff. And if you're a mature system, you actually have processes for doing those things. You don't get out a whole new cookbook every year and start over. And the more mature systems, actually, as we've been looking at as we write ISO 9004, I'm on the committee that's writing the best practices guide that backs up ISO 9001, is that the better companies, the best practice companies, have ways of scanning this continually. They don't wait until the end of the year and say, uh-oh, something happened back in February we should have been taken note of. Now, this is the slide. This is the takeaway slide. It's in the notes to talk to your boss about, or your leadership team. These are the words that you want to take away from crucial clause number 1. So be sure you get this written down in your book. Context of the organization affects virtually all decisions about applying the standard. So you need to systematically define, monitor, and review your purpose, strategic direction, intended results, and the relevant internal and external issues. Okay, so get that in your book because it's important, and you want to be sure that you don't come up short on that when it comes time for an audit, or furthermore, that you leave that off the table in what you actually do. All right, we're 15 minutes into the crucial clauses, and we've only covered one of them. Don't worry, that's a long one, and we're gonna pick up the pace here. Crucial clause number 2, interested parties. 4.2 says that you have to understand the needs and expectations of interested parties. So I urge you to get out your copy of ISO 9001 and highlight these same things because they're the important words about the things that you have to do. And we're going to kind of go through this in reverse order when we spell it out. But I'll read it in the first place just so you see what's in there, and then keep this page of your workbook open. Due to their effect or potential effect on the organization's ability to consistently provide what it makes, you shall determine, there's a shall for you, and it says determine, it doesn't say document, but Karen Rawson says document because you're going to forget. The CB doesn't tell you, they just say you have to determine, and if everyone they ask says the same thing, you're going to be fine. But anyway, you shall determine your interested parties, the requirements they have, and then you have to monitor and review that information. And notice that in both of these, they say that are relevant to your quality management system. So let's look at what makes something relevant. And the answer is right there in the clause itself. It says, the first one, due to their effect or potential effect on your ability to do your job. So let me give you some examples of those. And this is in your workbook too. Let's see, Teresa, is this one actually spelled out? Yeah, you want to be sure that you get that you take down some of these notes, but these are just thought starters for you. And the next one is a heavy content page as well. Yeah, it's got room for you to take some notes in there. Okay, so take these notes, write quickly, but you know this is not like the gospel. It's in ISO 9002, and it's just a way for you to get some of these notes written down for yourself when you go in to talk to your manager about the kinds of things your team, and get them on board with what do we have to do for defining our relevant interested parties. Well, your customers, your suppliers, and your employees are the ones that you've always thought about, right? The customers give you requirements, suppliers give you the materials and services on time, on quality, they help you with planning and so forth. Your owners and investors, they expect to make a profit. And that's the thing that everybody always said to me about why owners and investors are stakeholders. Well, it's much more than that when you think about their ability to impact your ability to achieve your goals. How can owners and investors affect whether you achieve your goals or not? Have you ever put in your capital plan for that new piece of equipment you need, or that new software upgrade you need, or the new IT equipment, and corporate says, no, not this year. It's not in the CapEx plan. Well, corporate or your investors or your owners or even whoever has the credit for the company, they can affect your ability to be effective for delivery speed or for customer satisfaction or for introducing new products on time, because whether or not they decide to invest in your part of the business, the stuff that's important to quality, where are they putting their money? Unions, do you have a strong workforce that you can work with? Your partners? If you're working with partners, your name is on the product that's going out to the customers, the service. You've cobbled together a bunch of different providers who work together on a big project, and your subcontractors or your equipment providers, the company that's paying you is paying you and figures that you've taken care of everyone else. So your partners definitely have an expectation that your quality is. Your partners have an impact on whether the quality your customers receive is what they want. If your partners blow it, it's as good as if you've blown it. And that's something that if you're working in the depths of a factory, or if you're working in a particular process within a business, you're probably not thinking very much about those external partners. You're thinking about your specific role. So this is what's different about ISO 9001 2015. It's saying the higher levels, the leadership, the major process owners, the people who make the goals for the business, need to be thinking about who are those relevant interested parties who affect whether you make your goals or not. Now, your competitors I talked about before, they can influence. They're interested parties not because they put requirements on you directly. They don't say, hey, company, go do this because I want you to do it. They don't say, hey, decrease your on-time delivery so I can make more money. But what they can do is they can make improvements that then you have to catch up with. So they do, in fact, influence what you may have to do. And then, of course, regulators, if you answer to them, you know they are relevant interested parties. Now let's think about what their needs and expectations once you've come up with a list of all those folks. Well, what are their relevant requirements? What's relevant to your QMS? Well, obviously, it's things related to quality, cost, and speed. So if they have requirements for your products and services, the specifications they put on them, there may be requirements from those folks for cost to your business, for example, for your owners and shareholders, or cost for other people because maybe your partners are putting requirements on you for what you can spend, how much you can come in at on a job you're working on with them. Speed for on-time delivery, for responding to requests, for launching products on time, adapting to change. And then there are a lot of business requirements that may come down that you didn't specify for the particular process that you work in, but they may be internal company requirements. For example, profits that you have to deliver to corporate. Or they may say all of our facilities are going to be have Six Sigma projects that deliver so much amount in savings per year. Or they may say we're going to be ISO 9001 certified, or other things having to do with quality about how the business wants that your business to operate. When we say relevant to your QMS, we're talking about the ways that you get things done. And then there may be legal and regulatory requirements that come down directly in contracts or come down through just the market that you're in. I'll leave that up for a second so you can write a few things down. Now remember, you can keep ask questions, and please, we do have the slide number on the bottom of each of these. It's going to be helpful to me when we get to questions at the end. If you'll note the slide number. And if it's just a matter of, would you go back? I didn't write everything down for that. Don't worry, you're going to get a copy of the deck. But if it's a matter of, I disagreed with you, or I don't see how that actually applies, take me back to that particular slide and we will answer those. In fact, anything that comes up that says, I didn't get everything written down on the page, pardon me, I know we're going to have a lot of questions, so we're not going to even pull those ones up. But if you still have them after you see the slide deck that comes around, let me know. So the big idea, the crucial clause number 2 that you take back to the business, is that you now have to show the broader range of stakeholders' expectations and show that you systematically determine, monitor, review, and update those. It'd be really easy to assume that the new requirement is not new. I was talking to an auditor once when this one first came out, and she said, well, you've always had to understand the requirements of your stakeholders. You need to understand what customer expectations are. You've needed to put out purchase orders that say what you want. Well, no. Those things were always in there and they still are in there. But the change is that the business now needs to show that the needs and expectations from that broader range, like I put up there, are systematically determined, monitored, reviewed, and updated. The well-managed companies, the very mature processes, have already been taking into account all the expectations from the full range of interested parties. But now ISO is asking organizations who want to be certified to do that in a bigger way than they've asked before. And it's not enough for top management to just consider that information informally or to take it into account when they write a particular contract. No, ISO expects those systematic methods for identifying who puts requirements on the business, what the requirements are, and whether they change. Now, inside scoop here, I told you in the title of the class that I was going to tell you things that your CB wouldn't tell you, right? Well, the thing that your CB is not going to tell you is what is the bare minimum that you have to do to meet requirements, okay? And I'll tell you, for most auditors, if you cover the things that have always been covered, you're probably going to get a pass. You might get a minor because you've done a lot of it. They might give you an opportunity for improvement to do more. Let me just tell you, when are you ever going to focus on this like you are now? Take the time right now to squeeze the juice out of this standard, to get what it's really asking you to do. And if you've already gotten certified and you didn't do these things and you say, but Karen, you're putting requirements on us that we don't have to do. I realize that. I'm telling you things the CB isn't going to tell you. I'm telling you how to get the most out of the standard. And I hope that you'll take these things back and say, well, I think we're okay on this for our audit. I think we've done a pretty good job, and we're going to build on it next year. So here's crucial clause number 3. We did 1 and 2 out of clause 4.1 and 4.2. We're going into clause 4.4. Believe me, eventually we will get out of clause 4 because this is the last one in there. But it's the longest clause of 4. If you wonder what 4.3 is, it's scope. It's pretty straightforward. My TL9000 clients, we're going to take a look at it in a follow-on webinar, but follow-on program I'll be offering. But 4.4 is really the crucial clause here. And I've just highlighted the keywords here, so do it in your own book and follow along in your workbook. You have to determine the processes needed for the quality management system, including the inputs and the outputs, the sequence and interaction of your processes, the criteria and methods to be sure you're effective, the resources you need and their availability, the responsibilities and authorities for your processes. And then later we're going to talk about in clause 6.1, the risks and opportunities. We'll go into that in a big way in a little while, but remember that comes back to the process approach. And then this is the general all-purpose, you guys are messing up and not getting what you're supposed to do clause, this is the one that the auditor can throw the book at you with, okay? Because this is where ISO says you have to get your intended results. Draw a big circle around G in your book because people say, oh, well, you can make concrete life preservers in ISO. No, you can't unless your intended result was to drown people. The intended results are required, and you have to make sure if your processes aren't getting your intended results, remember we talked about in 4.1, then you have to implement any changes needed to get those results. And you have to improve your processes and your management system overall. Okay, so that's the longest clause, I think, in the book. I'm pretty sure that's the longest clause in ISO because this time around, they're really emphasizing the process approach. Here's an example of one way that a company put its process, it's a high-level process map together. Now, I've seen companies just do a little grid, and it might work for them, but they've really underdone it in a lot of cases, and auditors have let it slide. Process approach was in there in the last version, but they didn't really know how to audit for it. What I like about this slide is it divides a company's processes into core processes, support processes, shared services, like what does corporate do for them, and then management processes for the management team that does all the shared, the core processes and support processes. Each one of these little boxes about its design process, how they go through design, how they ship product, how they get it into volume production and send it over to the factory or their contract manufacturer. Each one of these, if this were a clickable map, you'd click on it and you'd get a process for that project charter with all the templates and the storage locations for records and so forth. If you clicked on order management, that's a process. Order management is a process. Logistics and shipping is a process. Purchasing is a process. So that's the way this company said, these are all our processes and how they work together. The customer is paying us to do all these things. Figure out what we're going to sell them, design it, make it, and then also these things that cover all the different products they make. And whether you call something core, support, or what order you put these in is whatever works for your business. But you're supposed to think it through. And we'll get into why you think it through in a big way in our follow-on program, but these are the things you really need to do. So this is what leaders need to know. Take this back to your manager and talk about, or to your leadership team if you're leading a group, and say, first of all, each one of those processes on that big map should have an owner who's accountable for the results and who relates to the other process owners, because if you pull on one end of the quilt, it shortens the other side of the bed, right? Leaders of the overall quality management system should, and those process owners working together, should define some standard templates and process expectations for documents. For example, are we going to have process interaction diagrams across the whole business? Will each process have a diagram that lists those things that 4.4 said it has to have? Or are you going to do that in a Word document somehow? How do you expect your processes to do that? Give them some guidance to go on so there's some consistency across the organization. This is a good time in the transition to go through your procedures and work instructions. Maybe nobody's ever really using them. Maybe they're just shelfware that you show the auditor. Get rid of the ones that you don't need. Make them training documents if that's all they are. Put the procedures and work instructions out there that people really need. Update them if they're wrong. Show people what records and approvals they need. You don't need to put more records than you need to. Think about why. And we go through that in the program, our follow-on programs, and when we're consulting about what records and approvals do you really need. Really set up standardized storage methods across your business, and they may be different for different processes, but you don't want people shoving things in their personal hard drive where no one else can get to it. A little tip for how mature systems work: they have processes for their processes. Well-funded, well-managed, very large companies have whole people in charge of how processes work. Now, what does the auditor expect to see? This is the good stuff. This is the stuff they're not going to tell you they expect to see. They're not going to tell you you have to document it. The standard said, to the extent necessary. So what I'm telling you, the Karen Rawson approach to what your auditor won't tell you, what the standard really means, what companies who are doing well are doing in most cases, is that you should document. You really should, almost shall document your processes within your scope. How would you get away with not documenting what processes you're running? It said you had to determine, and it means determine those processes, determine their inputs and outputs. So document it. Document how the processes work together. A diagram works pretty well with the lower level documents than showing the tight interactions, like what goes, how does the workflow from one area to the other, or who has to approve from another process or be involved, what roles are in there. You need to define, in other words, write down what you measure and monitor to show effectiveness. Who's involved in the processes, and then you need to define, I suggest you write this down, how to do the process. It's really funny when you get people together and they all say, well, that's not how we do it, particularly if you've got multi-sites. So what single site variation is allowed and what's by the books got to happen. You need to document your corrective action. That's what it meant by you shall take the actions necessary to achieve your intended results. And then how you do continual improvement. We'll look at all that more in risks and opportunities, because it says also that you have to define your risks and opportunities of your processes. So here's the big idea to take home to your leadership team when you say, what do we really have to do around here? You now need to show that the process approach is fully in place. The process approach is not just for production processes. It's not just for your core process. It talks about the processes of the business. Support processes like how do you do audits? That's a process. You need, before the standard said before that you had to have a procedure for it. So it's part of an overall process of checking how the business is going. So they expect processes to be defined, followed, measured, and improved. And your evidence needs to be obvious in every process, not just production. Some people were just showing their auditor a table or a diagram, and they're saying, see, we do the process approach. Well, I'll tell you, I was talking to a company that said that it was a CB. I'm not going to tell you which one, but the CB was bringing their people in as the standard was being rolled out. The different versions of the draft were coming out, and it said the process approach, and some auditor had the nerve to raise his hand. I was actually talking to one of his clients who explained this, but this guy had the temerity to raise his hand and say, for all we've been talking about this process approach for 10 years now, 17 years now, what are we really supposed to be looking for in an audit? And then the heads around the room started nodding, and people were saying, yeah, I had that question too. What do I really have to look for? What does it mean you have to show the process approach? So that CB called in an expert who shall remain nameless, but is a big wheel in the field, called in the expert to explain to auditors, professional auditors who had been auditing for years, what the process approach means. So you need to find out what that means, because your auditors have had a whole bunch of training this year and they are loaded for bear. And that's another one of the things that the auditors are not going to say how to address, but I'm telling you on that last slide what they're looking for. And it's straight out of the standard. I just put it in plain English there. Okay, crucial clause number 4. We are finally out of clause 4 as we move into, now I told you it was crucial clauses. I lied. It's not 6 crucial clauses, because crucial clause number 4 actually pertains to 2 different clauses in the book, because they divide up the responsibilities for leadership and performance across clause 5 and 9, which makes a lot of sense when you look at the model overall. So what does it say? I've got 3 slides here on clip outs from the standard, and you want to highlight these in your own book. Top management shall demonstrate leadership and commitment by taking accountability for the effectiveness, by making sure the policy and objectives are established. Here's the big part: are compatible with the context and strategic direction of the organization. You know what they used to do? They used to say, okay, management rep, write me some policy and objectives and I'll run with them. Now they're really supposed to tie to the purpose and strategic direction. So if the strategic direction says we're going to be number one in services in the, Southeast market, then what do you have for objectives around number one for service? Does that mean number one for on-time delivery? So your policy, your quality objectives need to tie to your strategic direction. We dig into this in our implementation class. What do those objectives really mean? So I copied A, B, and now here's letter G. I snipped out a little part there because I copyrighted material. I can't give too much of someone else's work away except for what's allowed for discussion of it. But it's making sure, this is where it says, I said in 4.4, it said, here's where the standard says that you have to achieve your intended results. Here's where it says leadership is accountable for effectiveness. And you think they really mean it? They also said has to achieve intended results. If I were looking for this as an auditor, I'd be looking for leaders to have intended results in their goals and objectives personally, and for accountability for the effectiveness to be in some way defined and rewarded. When do they talk about it? They only talk about it at the annual review. Well, then now we get into that. The what is leadership supposed to be keeping up on? Well, it's under leadership and performance. It says the organization shall determine. And if you're accountable as a leader, you're probably one of the people determining this, right? So it says the organization shall determine what to monitor and measure, how we're going to monitor and measure to be sure that we're getting valid results. We have to determine when we're going to monitor and measure, when the results are going to be analyzed and evaluated. This is not shelfware. You don't just throw it into the database and never look at it. It expects you to define. You can't, and hint, if your answer is never, you're probably going to get a nonconformity, huh? Okay, so it says the organization shall evaluate the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system and retain evidence. And that has to do, in 911 general, has to do with monitoring and measuring your processes overall, your products and so forth. But 9.3 is in the management review. And that's why I'm putting this part of 9 in crucial clause number 4, right up there with clause 5. It says top management has to review the QMS for effectiveness. And once again, that strategic direction word, alignment with strategic direction. Is the management system drifting from either of those? And what it says they have to do when they carry out these management reviews, they're looking for changes in the external and internal issues. And oh, by the way, back in 4.1, crucial clause number 1, it said that you had to monitor and review external and internal issues. And here it says leadership is supposed to do it. So it ties 4, 5, and 9 together. And then it says information on performance and effectiveness, including trends in things like your monitoring and measurement results. There's a lot of other things they're going to review there as well. But the point is they're looking at monitoring and measurement results. This is a results-oriented standard here. And that's how they get to their accountability. Remember it said leadership was accountable for achieving the intended results? Well, they better be aware of what those results are. And that's one of the things I'm asking them about, the results related to their quality objectives when I'm auditing them. And by the way, the DESERA group is not a third-party auditor. We're not a CB. We can't come in and audit you, but we can come in and give you that thorough simulated CB audit so you'll know, well, are we really doing what we're supposed to do? Because often a company isn't exactly forthcoming with their certification body, but their leaders are saying, how do we get certified and then still have quality problems? So anyway, these are the things that the leaders are supposed to be reviewing. And the auditors may or may not dig very deeply into that, but what we expect them to be doing is not just when they talk to the managers about, how are you accountable for the process approach? Have you deployed the process approach? No, they're going to look throughout the entire organization to see if clauses 5 and 9 are in place, because the leaders are going to sing a great song. But it's only when you get down to how things actually happen. Are the quality management principles that are spelled out on an ISO 9000 used? Is the process approach really deployed? Did they really have a policy that reflects the purpose, context, strategic direction, and is it really applied? And then do those quality objectives flow all the way down? Like I said, we get into this in our workshops to the relevant functions, levels, and processes. If it stops at the level of our objective is to foster a zeal for quality among all employees, I'm like, okay, let's get out the zealometer and see if everyone has a zeal for quality. It's got to be something measurable that goes down to all levels into the process level. And then auditors are going to be looking for results achieved. They're going to be looking for improvement, for customer focus, and we'll get into it in a minute, the one you've been waiting for, risk-based thinking, starting at the top, because leaders are responsible for that. So they're going to interview leaders in a different way than they have in the past, but they're going to be looking for evidence of what the leaders said all through the organization. So it's not enough for the leaders just to say it. But you know what? Leaders are no longer going to get a courtesy call in audits. They're accountable for QMS performance. And that means that in this standard, there's a greater emphasis, wait till you see crucial clause number 6, on planning. We've already mentioned the process approach. In this one, we talked about reviewing performance. And I told you in the process approach too about making the necessary changes to achieve results. ISO 9001:2015 is a performance-focused standard. I think looking back over the first versions, they were procedure-focused. Do you have something written down? Say what you do what you say. And then in 2000, it was customer-focused, all this customer satisfaction stuff. And even they said it was process-focused in 2000. But really, in 2015, this standard became performance-focused. It put it on the manager to flow this all the way through the organization, starting at the very top and going through every process of the organization. Okay, now, crucial clause number 5, risk-based thinking. We'll have an entire program on risk-based thinking because there's so many companies that want this. I know I've been promising it for 2 years, and I've been so busy going out doing workshops with companies on this. There are lots of comments about risk-based thinking coming in from, I see one from Rudy, one from Chris, Rodney, I think it's Tarhe, not sure how to say your name, but I see you put in some comments on that, and we'll get to those at the end. I said we'll stay until the last questions are answered. But let me just go through the content that I have now, and maybe I'll answer it for you. Okay, risk-based thinking appears in at least 13 clauses. And you thought that I'd start with 6.1, but no. Let's go back to clause 5.1 that we talked about in crucial clause number 4. It says top management shall demonstrate leadership and commitment by promoting the use of the process approach and risk-based thinking. Now, what's great about this is that guy that's been sitting down in the engineering department saying, oh my gosh, the O-rings, right? The guy that's been saying, if such and such happens, we're hosed. The person who sees what's actually going on where the rubber meets the road. This is saying, you know what? Leaders are supposed to promote the use of risk-based thinking throughout. And you've got an ear up there now because ISO says so? No, actually because a company that's really deploying ISO 9001:2015 will really begin to use the how do we identify what could go wrong and what are we going to do about it. So it says in 6.1, when you're planning the quality management system, so that doesn't mean when you're planning your, procedures and your document control mechanisms. It's talking about when you're planning the ways that you get things done around here. You have to look at the issues, those internal and external issues that we said could lead to risks. They're things we're going to keep an eye on. And then you have to look at the requirements that we talked about in 4.2, those things that your interested parties say we want done, and figure out the risks and opportunities so that you can achieve your results. Remember, I told you this is performance focused, that you can enhance the desirable effects. We'll talk about that in a minute, prevent or reduce the undesired effects, and achieve improvement. Okay, so it says that when you're planning how we do things around here, you're going to build all these things into your processes. Now, you've probably already done that in a lot of cases. We'll talk about that coming up. It says that you have to plan actions to address your risks and opportunities. And then you have to plan how to put those, integrate and implement those actions into all your processes, and how to evaluate the effectiveness of those actions. It also says, the words they use here, I've got some friends who put this in more colloquial ways. They say, the only thing you have to do about risk is remember, don't spend $1 to save a dime just to please the auditor. Another one is, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. So they're not telling you to get rid of every possible risk that can happen in your company, but the ones that could have a major impact, you better have a major plan for. So let's think about this. You're going to have to go the risks related to your internal and external issues, the risks related to your interested parties, and the risks related to achieving results, not being hurt by negatives, getting the most out of the positives, and making improvements. Okay, let's look at the practical applications. Another one that you can just fill in everything that comes to mind. You'll think of some things that I'm not even thinking of as we go through this. In the past, let's start in the middle of this thing first. In the past, this middle bar, products and services, you've been doing this all along if you've been meeting ISO 9001. If you're a design company, you've already got design controls, product reviews, and thinking of the risks associated with the projects that you're going through. You've got production controls, the checks that you do on the production line, and the first article inspections, and the all the different things that you do to make sure that people are working according to what they're supposed to be doing to get the results that they want. You've got risks associated with complexity. If you've been making products that have 4 parts and you're going up to something incredibly complex, it's got 100 parts or 500 parts, you've got new risks associated with those that you probably need to take into account. A little drawing on the machine is probably not enough for that high-tech whiz-bang equipment that you're using in your processes. Now I'm jumping down into processes as well. But you've already got processes, you've got risk-based thinking around dealing with customer changes, getting those orders changed. That was in 7.2 in the last version of the standard. You had ways of dealing with customer-initiated changes. You've had ways of dealing with competitive pressures and weaknesses. And you've also had, some companies have FMEAs on their processes, failure mode and effects analysis, or design FMEAs on the design part. You've had risk analysis around your capacity. What if orders go up? What do we do? When do we outsource? You've probably had those kinds of things in there. Maybe you haven't looked so much at things like information accuracy and availability. Or down here under infrastructure, what if you get hacked? What if you get hacked? What if your computers go down? What do you do if you have, what do you have in place for disaster recovery and business continuity? You've got a customer with a big launch coming on Tuesday and your IT system crashes on Monday. Okay, so infrastructure would be an area that maybe your business hasn't looked at very carefully yet. Maybe you have. If you live in Hurricane Alley or Tornado Alley, you've probably got some of these things in place already. And you've probably already got some stuff in place about supplier and outsourcing risks. You're looking at incoming inspection. Are you qualified for dock to stock some of your suppliers for your received products and services? You've probably already got controls in place for on-time receipt where you're giving them feedback. You've got scorecards. You've got corrective actions going around with your suppliers. You've got ways of working with outsourced entities about responsiveness to change, or your suppliers changing quantities or delivery dates, or making sure they have enough capacity. Are they going under anything like labor negotiations, or do you guys have between you new contract negotiations? So you should be looking at this range of risks associated with your suppliers as you do your scanning according to your ongoing scanning of your issues. Then you bring up, oh, we got a risk here we got to look at. Sometimes these risks come about because of new products or new processes or new facilities you've opened, new markets you've opened. So you see how your issues and your interested parties tie to your risks. They're different things, but they tie very closely together. But this one right here is the biggest one that ISO has not formally asked anyone to take. Well, it's been in there before, but it's been buried so much that nobody's really built it into their quality management system. It's your business risks. What you're supposed to be doing because of clause 6.1 is to look at the external issues, actions by your competitors or changes in technologies, looking at your external parties' requirements or negotiations with your partners, looking at things like, internal issues like you're implementing a new ERP system. Or you're upgrading to new servers or something, or you're relocating production to someplace else, or you've got a major reorganization of divisions. Those would be internal issues that nobody's ever taken into account in their quality management system. In the past, the only place it said anything about doing that was in Clause 5 under leadership. It was associated with management review. And we know that a lot of companies count their management review as that once a year dog and pony show they do to show the auditor that they do management review, when they're actually doing a lot of things throughout the year to deal with these kinds of changes, but nobody's looking at the impact on all the different processes and how they work together. So business risks are the biggest thing in 6.1 that's different from how it was phrased and what people were actually doing in ISO 9001 and discussing in audits. So risk-based thinking. under 6.1, it says actions to address risk-based thinking. And here's some stuff that the auditor may or may not tell you. The thing is, you're not required to have a formal process. A lot of companies do. You're not required to have a formal process, one size fits all throughout the company. You can use different methods and different levels of formality across processes. You probably, if you're doing, high-tech design, you probably have a formal process for design. And you may not have it for incoming inspection, but you'd have different levels and methods of formality across your processes. But what you have to be able to do is demonstrate compliance to clause 6.1 and commitment by management to practice risk-based thinking. The general concepts, it's pretty straightforward. You have to identify your risks and opportunities. You have to analyze the potential impact. You have to plan how you're going to respond to any risks that do happen. And then you have to control. You have to look periodically at your risks and say, has anything changed on these? Do we need to update our response plan? Because, there are a whole lot more hackers going after our kind of business than we ever saw before, because our partner was hacked, or because we've got a new whatever out there. Now, I told you we'd talk a little bit about opportunities. Opportunities are kind of like risks in disguise. I was working with a company that had the biggest contract they were that they'd ever been asked to do. They were a fairly young company, biggest contract they'd ever been asked to bid on. If they got that contract, it was going to be all-out effort of everyone to get ready to do this at the cost that they promised to do it. In fact, there were some people inside that company that I think were secretly hoping they didn't get that contract or just got a part of it, because it was going to wreak such havoc on the way they did business. So the opportunity itself represents a risk to the business. Another kind of opportunity might be if you've got a whole bunch of new labor coming on the market. You've got a reduction in force happening at somebody in your community, and a whole bunch of people are going to be laid off. That might be an opportunity to upgrade some skills, or to increase capacity, or maybe move in some products and services that were done someplace else in the country or in the world and do them in your own factory, because they're going to be a whole bunch of people on the market who are able to do those things. So risks are opportunities. Opportunities are sort of risks in disguise. It's telling you to look at the good things that are going to happen and make the most of them, but recognize that you've also got some responses that you need to do internally so that you can make the most of it without stubbing your toe. Here's a leadership tip. It's things you want to discuss with your team. It's the kind of thing that the auditor's not going to tell you. You can get away with very little for certification. You could probably get away with just continuing to do those things with products and services and suppliers and, the stuff that I said we're already on board, your design controls and so forth. But if you don't take this opportunity right now to expand your planning, to looking at your business processes, at your infrastructure, the risks associated with your infrastructure, other kinds of things that may not be part of your planning right now, your future thinking, think of the effect of the poor planning on the results for your own business and your customers. Also think, if you lead your company through right now and say, oh, we don't have to do anything for this, it's no big deal, we've already been doing this, it's a paperwork drill. You just write something up in your quality manual. You've decided to keep a quality manual because it has some good stuff in it. Written some stuff up, explained it away, and said, we're fine. A sloppy job, then when you try to go in and say, well, now we're really going to do it, people are going to say, what? Why do we have to do this now? We got certified. So take your time to explain. If you're already certified and you got away with it just doing a little bit, this is your continual improvement effort for the next year. Build on what you've done and recognize that your competitors may be using ISO 9001 2015 to take a giant leap. Okay, maybe they've done this risk-based thinking. Let me tell you about a company who needed a certain part that was only made or primarily made at one factory in the world. Some of you remember this if you were doing business in around 2000 in the integrated circuit business. Important part for a certain industry was made pretty much in one factory, and that factory had a fire. You know who got the parts? The people who had already thought of the risks associated with losing that supplier. What would they do? And they had contracts in place, and they had the right amount of safety stock staged, and they had the we're first in line to get stuff pieces in place. You don't want your competitors to be thinking of those kinds of risks ahead of you. And then you're caught flat-footed, and your suppliers say, your customers say, we're never doing business with them again. So the good planning can lead to your market advantages. And now is the time, if not now, then in continual improvement with your quality management system to build in risk-based thinking. So what's the big idea? You want to consider the issues you face and the requirements of your interested parties that you talked about back in Crucial Clauses 1 and 2, and ask yourself, what could keep you from achieving your goals? And I'm not just talking about those quality objectives that you put on paper because the auditor's going to look at them. I'm talking about the intended results of your quality management system. What do you expect? The ways you work to deliver for your business in terms of effectiveness and efficiency. So ask yourself, what could go wrong? And what could stop it from happening? That's your prevention. And what would you do if it did happen? When you break Clause 6.1 down into those three questions, a lot of people will be saying, what's the big deal? We've been doing that all along. And what I'm asking you to do is, if you've already been doing all that, build on it. Use this time to build on it, or to check that you've really done a good job of it in the areas that you're doing already. Okay, and finally, our last crucial clause number 6. We've come nearly to the end, and we've got 18 minutes left in the presentation, so we'll have some time for some additional information I'll be giving you to tie this all together to the next steps that you'll be taking to implement or to get ready for transition. Under planning of changes, it says you need to determine the need for changes. When you find out you're going to change something in the ways we do business around here, we're going to do that in a planned manner. We're going to make those changes in a planned manner. We're going to look at the purpose and the potential consequences, aka risks. We're going to look at the integrity of the quality management system. Do we have the resources, and who's going to do what? Okay, that's what the next slide says, and you can write this in. You can fill those kinds of things into your workbook. So what the auditors expect to see is that you've done planning, that you have effective planning methods. I mean, that when you've done changes, they're effective. Now, you can't have an auditor come in there and say, well, we're just getting certified now, and so you can see for our plans going forward that we're always going to plan to be effective. See, we've got it written down in a procedure. That's not going to work. Well, it might with a lazy auditor, and I hate to admit that there are those lazy auditors out there, and your CB won't tell you that, but you might snow your auditor. To what end, right? What do you get out of that? So what the auditor is going to want to know is that since the last time they came in for an audit, what are some of the changes at the business level since the past audit? They're going to say, and this is aside from what it said in risk-based thinking being built into all your process. We're talking about the big changes, not the routine changes that you do every day, like a line changeover. We're talking about the big changes. What are the big changes to the business since your past audit? What are some changes you have in progress? And what are some changes that you have in the long term and the short term? They're going to ask you for a description of those. If it were me, if I were getting ready for an audit, I do believe I'd have a little cheat sheet listing some of those, because then when they say, what are some of your changes, everybody in the company is going to talk about the same sorts of changes and how they went. They're going to have the party line. If you haven't thought that through, that guy down in engineering is going to open his mouth and say something you wish he didn't say about the change that went entirely wrong. Inside tip, no charge for that one. Just, it's a good idea to be prepared, because you'll be thinking through, how do we do change management around here for the big changes? Work it through with your team. What have we done in the past? What are we working on now? And what do we see coming? And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to start showing evidence of our planning. If what you need to show your auditor is on one of those older changes, you didn't do a very good job of planning and you did some continual improvement, that's a good thing. But what you need to show is why are you making the change, and why now? You need to show what good or bad could come out of the change. And then you need to show that you've got the resources and the responsibilities and authorities during the change and after the change. If an auditor sees that happening, they're going to say, okay, you've done a good job of what 6.3 requires you to do. So let's look at what those changes are they're talking about. They're not talking about routine changes like you onboard a new employee, or you change over the line, or you have an ECO. Okay, those are all built into the processes you've had all along. They're still built into those clauses of the standard. This new clause 6.3 is talking about planning for change of things like you're doing, well, maybe if you're doing a big Kaizen event. I'm not talking about the little, we move this from over here to over there. I'm talking about if you do a big event that overhauls a whole department, for example, or you put in a big Six Sigma project. You got to talk about the whys and the whos and the what's changing and how do we make sure it actually works. Some of the other things would be like if you've got big facilities changes or big management changes like reorgs and acquisitions and mergers, anything big related to IT. IT will tell you they have the plans for that. Their project manager went through all the project planning for that, and their project manager is going to tell you, oh, yeah, we addressed all the risks. But they may not have taken into account all the things that change will have on you, on your quality management system, on all the ways that you do work around your business. So anytime there's a major IT systems change, ISO is now asking you to build that into your quality management system, not just let the outside entity say, don't worry, we have everything under control. If you're outsourcing a process, that's a big change. You've got big risks associated with that in terms of what your customer sees. Or if you've got major volume adjustments, you may be bringing on temporary staff, you may be firing up equipment that you haven't used very often, or using things in a different way, changing the order of how or sequence of how things happen. Those would be things you need to plan, and you need to plan the things in this box. It said it on the previous page. Okay, that's your plan there. So, clause 6.3, the big idea, for all non-routine changes affecting the ways you work, because the other changes are handled in the other clauses, show your advanced planning that shows why you're changing, the risks and the plans for the risks, what changes, who's going to do what, when, and how, where your resources are going to be. That's the big change in clause 6.3 that wasn't in the standard very well before. It was snuck in there, and the auditors very seldom audited for it because they were too busy for looking at whether your documents were numbered correctly. Yeah, I can be a little snarky because I've seen some lazy auditors out there, but I've also seen some excellent auditors, and most of the really excellent auditors I've seen are inside organizations who constantly nudge their organizations forward. And not just auditors, but people who understand quality management systems. There are 2 pages in your notes for the crucial clauses recap. You might want to print these out and put them over your desk and talk about them with people, but the context of the organization, interested parties' needs and expectations, the process approach, they really mean it now, the 2-for-1 clause, clause 5 and 9 on leadership and performance, risk-based thinking, which is in clause 6.1, but it's also in 13 clauses throughout the standard in one form or another, and then planning for change. Those are all your big changes. Okay, those are the 6 crucial clauses, and now you know about them, but now you may be asking yourself, what if I need some more? Like you're saying, I need even more detail to know what all this means. 90 minutes? Great, but I need some more. You might be saying, okay, I know what it says, but I need a plan. Or, yeah, you explained it to me, but how do I explain it to my management team so they know what's new for them? Or maybe you're saying, I'm going to have to lead some other people through this. I'm a real do-it-yourselfer, but I need some templates and some cheat sheets and some more slides that I could use to guide other people through it. So think about why you showed up today. Okay, you might be a transition team leader, you might be an overall leader, an internal auditor, in which case you might need some specialized training beyond this, but you've learned a lot of stuff. Well, there are 3 options. One way is do it yourself. Okay, if you're a person who's been around quality management systems since the 80s like I have, when ISO first attacked the United States, ISO 9001, you probably can read through this stuff and work with the other professionals in your business, and you've studied, you've been to webinars, you've read books, you can do it yourself. But if you are in the case of saying, I need some more training before I can do it myself, I need a little help along the way, templates, some more slides that I can use, I don't want to have to recreate everything and cobble it together from every webinar I've ever been to, every book I've ever read, then I'd love to invite you to get a spot in our upcoming program that's going to get you going on the right path. And in fact, this course that we're sharing is the foundation of all of our consulting that Desera does on ISO 9001 2015. And if you look at the bonus I'm going to give you in a little while, if you sign up for this training, you're going to see why. It's the foundation of what we do. It's what you're going to get that program when we come in and work with your company. Because you might be at the 3rd level of saying, I need some short-term targeted support exactly where I need it. If you're the person who says, I'm not a do-it-yourselfer, I'm behind the 8 ball, I don't have enough time to get this done, you need to come to our course. And then you need to decide what's next for you, whether you can do it yourself with that support, or whether you need to bring someone in to help you with some certain parts, or reassign some people within your company. please, please, please save your money and do not buy a turnkey solution. Do not go to the consultant that says, here's my packet templates and I'll get you going on this and we can get you certified in 30 days guaranteed. Because you get what you pay for. You will get something that you can't maintain. You'll get something that just barely scratches the surface and snows an auditor. And if you want to do that, you're wasting. I don't mean to be mean, but I just really think that it's unethical of auditors to do that. When I say we'll give you cheat sheets and templates, it's giving you starting points to work from to fit with your organization. But if you have an auditor who says it's no real change, I'll walk you through it, once again, your auditor is selling you short, okay? Unless perhaps they've seen that you've already in your company, like some of these global companies, met a lot of these requirements yourself. But remember, auditors are not allowed to tell you how to make the changes, okay? They can't tell you how. They can't go suggesting to you, well, when I come back, I need to see this so I can certify you. Here's your corrective action plan. They can't do that. Save your money from those kinds of things. So what we found is a lot of people are saying, I need this now. I need to know what to do and how to do it, but I can't fly to cities where the training is offered this month. It doesn't come to my city for 3 months. Or it's too far away. There's no training offered near me. Or they say, I can't even go to local training. That's a hassle. I got to pick up kids at daycare. I can't do that. Or they say, I know the CBs are just going to read me the standard. They're not going to give me enough specific information. They can't consult with me. I can't ask them enough questions. Or they're not getting it done fast enough through what, when you want to binge watch the training, you need to get the whole training program, not the webinar where you get a little something here, a little something there, or the books and the articles. So what Docera offers, the program that I would like to invite you to, is Docera's virtual instructor-led training. It's easy to attend. It's affordable. You'll get reliable, thorough information. My partner and I have been working on providing input to the writers of ISO 9001 and the related documents. It's interactive. It's not sitting there behind a screen and listening to a narrator speak to you in perfect British English about how to do ISO 9001. You can ask questions about your own situation. It's application-oriented. Like I said, you'll get templates and cheat sheets that'll guide you through the things that you need to do internally. It's not going to do it for you. You still have to do the work. And it doesn't tell you just how to recognize minimal compliance. Our training is going to focus on the 80% that matters the most. It's going to assume that you've been certified already, you're doing most of the things right, and it's going to work with you on the big things that you have to change. So here's the link, and Theresia should be texting it in the chat window to you right now. It'll be, so open your window and see it. It's going to be hard to copy this, but don't worry, you'll get the link in the follow-up mess with the recording for this and everything. But it's a link to the sign-up page for our upcoming course called 6 Crucial Steps. I like that word, crucial. And I like that number 6. The 6 Crucial Steps to ISO 9001 2015 Success, how to transition on time and make a positive impact on the business. We're doing this on September 6th and 7th, 2017. It's offered 9 to 11, 12 to 2, and 3 to 5. So it's a 2-day training where you get an hour off between the modules, and it's being offered on U.S. Central Time because I live in Dallas, so that's what time I work. Actually, we realize that is, if we do it Central Time, it covers most of the people on our mailing list. Most of the people who are likely to sign up for this are going to maybe have to come to work a little early or a little late, or maybe those are within the hours that you work anyway. The other thing is that we urge you to take this from home, where you won't be disturbed, if that's possible, or in a conference room from where you work, in your own office. If you're lucky enough to have a door, you'll just log in to GoToWebinar like you did today. And today we have all the phone lines off, so we can't hear you. But in the actual course, we'll have it open at certain times, and we'll actually be going through times where we'll be reporting on the chats that are coming in with questions and so forth. The price is $6.95 if you register by August 25th. It goes up to $7.95 after that. And in a minute, I'm going to give you some information on how to talk to your decision makers about whether you can spend the money on that training. But another thing to notice is that you can have this at your company. It's cost effective if you have 5 or more people who need to go through this training. And you might want to do that because you can select the times and dates subject to my availability or one of my other trainers' availability. But I will be delivering this first one on September 6th and 7th. It'll be me delivering it. The other ones, it'll depend on my availability, first come, first serve, filling up my calendar. And all the trainers are finding that their time is filling up this time of year. So I urge you to go to that link and check out the page that tells all about it. But I'll put the information that's on the sales page right up here if you're not jumping over there. It's what you get. You're going to get 2 days of live instructor-led training delivered via the web conference. So you're not doing an e-learning with quizzes and a test at the end or anything. You'll get introduced to all the requirements of ISO 9001:2015. I will tell you this, I'm not going to belabor the point on the ones that are just pretty much copy and paste from the old standard. Some things were just pretty much moved over, and I'm going to point out the changes to you because this is an advanced course. It's not starting from scratch, it's transition. If you need the initial course, please let me know. Shoot me, and if you need this from scratch, or if you have people who do, shoot me an email and I will let you know when we'll be offering that one. We'll go through implementation planning, and there are 6 crucial steps that we'll go through in detail. That's where you get the templates and the plans and the cheat sheets. You'll get the checklist, so you're sure you got everything done. I'll give you some exercises that you won't do on the day in the class like we would do if this were a 3 or 4 day on-site class with you, but it's for you to take back to your team to get them engaged. And we'll do live Q&A throughout. Like I said, you'll get a copy of the deck, and you can replay this course, unlike a live class where you go to a hotel room or have the trainer come into your class. You can replay this for 30 days. You'll also get a certificate if you register for this that will be, that'll satisfy requirements that your auditor or your corporate office or your professional association like PMP or ASQ may require for saying that you've been through training on this subject. The first part of the course is a leadership briefing. Wait till you see the bonus on this. This is what leaders need to know. Second topic, in-depth study. Then we'll talk about applications. We'll talk about performing a gap assessment. I'll give you templates for doing that. We'll talk about project planning and what you need to do to get it done with some sample plans. And then we'll go through those things that it takes to be sure you've got everything covered before the audit actually takes place. So what the boss really wants you to know, what the boss wants to know when you sit down and to the person who controls the purse strings, if you don't have your own training budget, is to say, well, how does this compare to public training that I might get from a certification body or another held in a hotel type public training? What we've seen, the going rate for quality management system training runs about $500 a day. So they're running about $1,000 for a 2-day class. They call it 8 hours a day, but come on, we've got the welcome and get to know you exercises. You've got breaks and lunch put in there. So our 2-day class is equivalent in the content that's out there. And we're offering it for $695 before August 25th. $795 is the regular registration price per person. If you're going away, you've got travel expenses plus the time away from home. Right now, we urge you, like I said, to take this from home or from your regular place of business where you've got a quiet place to sit. And if you have to travel, of course, you'd have travel expenses that you won't have. So this is really a cost-effective method for you to take this because you can review it after the fact, go back and look at certain modules of the 2-day class when it comes time that you're actually, when you get to the point of applying that. You can go back and review it. And you know what? Just because you called in for this, I'm going to tell you a secret. That 30-day review, if you get into trouble with it and you say, oh my gosh, I need to go through that module again, and you call me up and you say, Karen, can I see that module again? I'm probably going to say yes. In fact, I'm really going to say yes if you're a registered participant because I like my clients. Okay, wait a minute. Next one, the bonus. Remember I said that first module of the class was the leadership briefing? If you sign up for this class, you will get a letter, or you'll give me an address, and we'll send a letter to a colleague of yours, another manager, your boss, somebody in the leadership structure would be ideal, to go to that first 2-hour module and say, I want to attend this, and that person will get a certificate for attending. Second major bonus I want to tell you about here: if you register for this course, your registration pays for itself. Oh my gosh, Teresia, we forgot to change this one. I'm not going to do it on the slide right now. I'm going to say it in the recording and it'll be included on the sales page. You get to apply your full course fee to a future custom engagement that you would have on site or a virtual instructor-led class for your organization. Up to 2 people from the same organization can apply their registration fee. So your $695 or $795 will be credited back to you for a program for your organization this year or next year. Okay, so it's if you're doing the try before you buy, I'm one person going to this class to see if we need to bring it in. Unlike a class that you may take from in a public location, gets credited back to you right away in case you need further support to finish it on time, either another training class or some on-site work. If you register by August 25th, you also get not only the discounted price, you get these early bird bonuses. You get office hours with me for 3 separate 1-hour periods during the next month. Before September 28th, I'll post when those office hours will be. We'll open up a conference line. It won't be recorded, so you can ask what you want, and it won't be recorded. There may be other companies online. You can be anonymous if you want, but it's a chance for you to say, hey, here's what we're doing. Is this good enough? You can ask company-specific questions. And if you're an early bird, I also have an agreement with a CB, one of my favorite auditors out there, who's going to do an extra bonus class just for the early bird registrants to learn more about what to expect during a transition audit. So it's a chance for you to pick a CB's brain who's not your own CB. If this person is, I'll make special arrangements with you, or you can go anonymous on there to learn more about what to expect during a transition audit. This auditor will be explaining, what's different about these audits from other ones and validate or critique some of the things that I may have said in this one. Don't tell him I was so mean about how there are some lazy auditors out there, okay? Because he's really a good auditor. He's a strong auditor, and he's going to give you the real scoop. Okay, next slide. If you were going into questions now, I realize I kept you a couple of minutes late, but I will stay on the line. And rather than open the phone lines and get all the background noise and some people's hold music, I've had that happen before. We're going to go through the questions that Teresia has filtered out for me, and then we'll stay on the line as any more come in as we answer these. So I'll start at the top. Dale asked, let me move my microphone over here. Okay, Dale asked, can you please elaborate a little bit on monitor for internal and external issues? And he says he thinks the best way is to prove this is happening is via the quality management review records. And yes, in fact, Dale, that's right. That is one way that, I showed you when we got to that part, you hadn't read ahead in the deck, that's actually what the standard requires. The standard requires that you do that management review those. One thing the standard doesn't say is that all those things on that management review checklist have to happen in a single meeting. And we've worked with our clients on this, how to structure their quality management review process so that the right managers at the right time, so that they can make decisions related to quality, get information. So it may be that every other month you have an issues and interested parties and risks review. And you have that set up on your calendar. It's a conference call or everybody in the same room and there's notes taken. And if nothing's changed, nothing's changed. And if it has, then you might go through that as a group. When things are changing quickly, like you're being acquired by a company or you're merging somebody or you're opening a new facility, the fact is people are reviewing risks pretty regularly, but nobody's capturing those records. So I would set that up as part of a management review that's structured to say, here's how we do monitoring our internal and external issues and interested parties and the risks associated with our changes. Let's see, second question comes from Rick. He says, we recently updated our QMS manual to ISO 9001-2015 standard. The team is reviewing the requirements and implementation is expected to start within the month. Good. Is there a recommended time frame before we can have an external transition audit from 2008 to 2015 performed? And he says, we plan to perform an internal audit once we have the new requirements implemented. Rick, that's the, you answered your own question in the key there. You have to be the judge for yourself as to how long it's going to take your organization to come into compliance. And what I recommend, what DeSera does with our clients that we work through, is we do a first round of internal audits of the entire system. When we think they're about 80% of the way done. One reason we do that is to give them a little push so that they get somebody who says, yep, I'm done, bring on the auditors. We give them a little push so they have some time to, there's two things, push the ones who haven't done anything yet, and then the ones who haven't done such a thorough job have a little time to go back and look at it when we give them thorough feedback when we do that internal audit for our clients. If you're using your regular internal auditors, they may not be as thorough, and it's a good idea to give them 2 shots at the standard because they'll be learning things from all the audits they do, and they may be more thorough on a second round. So I'd recommend you have enough time to do 2 internal audit rounds before you have the external audit in. So generally with our clients, we're recommending at least 3 months. Another reason you want at least 3 months is it's some of those things like demonstrating that you're doing risk-based thinking, as we were talking about today, with looking at what the changes are, or reviewing your internal and external issues and how they affect your processes and so forth. Show that some of that stuff has worked. You're going to be able to show some of it within the first 3 months. If you have longer, so much the better. Now, one more thing. Auditors are running out of time. It's going to get harder and harder to schedule the auditor you want to do your 2015 audit. So you need to be getting on their schedule now if you're not already. Okay, I think Teresia pushed in one more. Yes, somebody said, do you offer on-site training for internal auditors? We do. That's one of the things that you could credit your course, that you could credit your course registration fee toward. If you wanted on-site internal auditor training, or if you wanted on-site leadership training or on-site process owner training so that they can learn how to do some of this process approach that maybe they thought they were doing and they're saying, wow, do I really have it covered? Yes, that's one of the things that our consultants love to do the most, and I do quite a bit of that myself. We love going in and working with teams, and the way we work it is we structure a project with it could be just training alone, or you could say, I want some training with some follow-on days that are for remote support to make sure we're applying the training properly, or are for come back in and do a work day after. And so we work with you to customize the training that you get. It's not go to a class and you're done. And for some people, for the do-it-yourselfers, that may be all you need. But for somebody who needs more help, we can structure more specific training. Now, I'm going to offer a little follow-on to this that I think somebody's probably going to offer is, do you offer internal audit training remotely? And the question is, the answer to that is, I don't have the training course up yet, but it will be offered shortly. And you'll get another slew of emails about that. I know, you guys, that you got a slew of emails from DeSera and from reminding you to come on this class, but I'll tell you, it's the highest attended webinar we've ever had. Partly, I think it's because it's advanced information. It's information people need right now, and it offered a pretty solid promise. But you won't miss it if you've attended this class and you haven't filtered out our emails. You'll find out about it, and you can always check back on our website and see what's on there. Yes, we will offer on-site training and also virtual training for internal auditors and other courses. And if there's something specifically you want, please let me know. Let's see, slide 42, how often is the review required? Let me get back to slide 42 here. Slide 42 said businesses need to show that needs and expectations are determined, monitored, reviewed, and updated as needed. The answer there is in the as needed. Now, that's why crucial clause number 1 was out there. Crucial clause number 1, and I said it applies to everything else you do in this book. All throughout the standard, it's going to say as needed, or to the extent necessary, or as appropriate, or considering the potential consequences. That's what context of the organization was all about. If you're in an organization that changes very seldom, very slow-moving organization, you've been doing these things the same way year in and year out, and there's not much competition, who knows, an annual review of that might be enough for you. But if you're in the tech world where market disruptions and supplier, new suppliers and all those different kinds of interested parties and their needs and expectations may change, you might want to be doing that every other month. I think every month might be a little too often, but one of the things that they're putting into the best practices guide in ISO 9004 is that the world-class organizations are doing that continually. Now, are they doing it continually in terms of having a management powwow to go through them? Probably not. But what it means is that, and I was in a world-class organization that was like this, the leaders in the organization, actually, and I've continued to work with them over the years, when I think of some of the larger clients that we've had that are staffed for this kind of thing, they've got people who make it their business to, it's the strategic planning group. They're looking throughout the year as to whether anything's changing. So if you can point within your organization that you have people Say you've contracted with an outside source for regulatory issues. You're doing continual review. You're getting a weekly or monthly update from the legal outsourced people about what regulations might be affecting your organization. If you've got compliance groups overall, that would be an example of how you're doing it continually. So the answer is, how often is it required? I think a lot of auditors would accept it if it's once a year. I think the better organizations have people who are on it all the time and who surface things according to the urgency to the organization. And I think that it depends on the speed of change in your organization. You get to decide how often to do the reviews. And I think it's a good idea to also, in that review, have a planned interval and anytime something urgent comes up that management needs to know about. Okay, next question. Kathy asked, is an actual meeting required for management review? We go over this in the 6 steps class about how do you get leaders on board with this. And I think I've already answered quite a bit of this. Evidence for this requirement can be as simple as meeting notes. It could be something that you keep in a wiki as long as it's protected. I mean, if you've got some online notes that you keep, the evidence that you keep for your meetings is once again influenced by, say it with me, everyone, context of the organization. Okay, so the meeting isn't required. The evidence is what's appropriate for your organization. A very small organization may have it in a Word file maintained by, the project manager, or if anybody's lucky enough to have an administrative assistant or office manager in a small business. It could be as extensive as notes that are made available to an entire senior leadership team. Someone else says, Kathy here says, on slide 54, under leadership performance clauses 5 and 9, it was mentioned that leaders no longer get a courtesy call. What exactly does that mean? Well, if this is the Kathy that I think it is that's asking, and I know her CB, her leaders don't get courtesy calls. They get audited. But there are some auditors out there, when the auditor comes in and needs to demonstrate that they've met with that they've interviewed management and found out about, are the requirements for management being met? It is let's have some coffee before the audit starts and show me a few slides from your management review. And yeah, you've got some objectives out there. And has anything really big changed? Good for you. We'll verify all that with your people as we go through. So what I'm saying is that for this first round, this transition audit, I think that leaders who have strong auditors should expect, and even if you don't have a strong auditor, that person who came in and gave you that courtesy call may have an office witness audit going on with them, or may have some extensive notes they have to put in, or they've been trained, and the certification bodies may be watching them a little more closely. I will tell you that under the TL 9000 standard, and this has gone out to a number of association meetings as an example. It was posted in a United Nations document. In fact, Sharonda Jeffries was instrumental in getting that in there about these witness audits, these market surveillance audits, the way the accreditation bodies are asking, and the industry groups are asking more of certification bodies, cracking down on them, giving them some more don't just do the bare minimum, get in there. So I think you can expect auditors on your transition audit to give more than have a cup of coffee with a leader type audit. Kathy again asks a question, and let's see how many more. We've got just a couple more questions after this, and we're going to see did any other come in. But the questions that came in earlier are companies required to have a certain amount of internal auditors based on company size to demonstrate that internal audits are effectively implemented and maintained? Well, if I were going to answer that, I would, if I had an auditor who told me that they did, I would go to the ISO 9001 standard and say, where in the standard does it tell me I need a certain number? Now, if you're trying to convince your auditor that you audited completely a 10,000 person company with one auditor, you're not going to pass the smell test, right? So auditors are using they're using business judgment to say, based on the evidence that I see, audit reports, any kind of checklist that may have been used, schedules of audits, auditors' notes, any kind of evidence that they may ask to see on your audit program, its thoroughness, its completeness, frequency, all of those types of, and even interviews with people who have been audited about how those audits happened. If an auditor thinks that your audit program is ineffective, it doesn't matter if everyone in the company is a certified internal auditor. And if the auditor thinks that your audit program is effective, it doesn't matter if one auditor did the entire thing or if you outsourced it to someone else. Now, you may have a certification body who has proposed some guidelines for what they expect their CVs to look for. Kind of here's some ways to temper your business judgment. But the standard itself does not say that you need to have a certain number of internal auditors. But like any process, the process of auditing needs to be evaluated for effectiveness. It needs to be evaluated internally, and it'll be evaluated by your external auditor. Let's see, Julia says, and in fact, she calls out slide 38, would the ISO standard revision be something we would need to include in the 6.3 planning for change examples for the auditor? Julia, you get the golden coin for the day. Actually, what I will mail you is a bust of Lincoln. I really believe in Lincoln as a leader, and I give anyone who brings out such a good question and talking point for me when I've been going on for nearly 2 hours. I hope somebody's still with me, but I will send you a bust of Lincoln cast in copper and zinc. Anyway, on 6.3, and I'm gonna go back to that because you may be listening to this or somebody may catch it on the replay, and it says let's see, should the ISO standard revision be something we need to change? Well, in fact, might this affect? Wait a minute, that's not. I don't think that was a slide it was on. I'm gonna go to. I think I'm looking at the wrong slide. I'm gonna pull up the slide where it talks about 6.3. Yeah, included in that's crucial clause number. That's the last one for 6.3. Sorry, bear with me here. I'm trying to find my slide. Oh, you know what? I could actually make this bigger so I could look at it. I found I need to wear glasses now and then. Okay, planning for change. When an organization determines the need for changes to the quality management system, Julia figured it out. 6.3 is telling organizations you better have a plan for how you carry out your transition. Okay, you better have a plan that talks about the purpose and their potential consequences of the changes, the integrity of the management system. What are we going to do differently? This would be an excellent example to show your auditor of how you used A, B, C, and D to make sure you did a good job of transition. And we haven't had any more beyond the ones that I'm answering right now, except one more from Kathy. Says, please show slide 73 again. Slide 73. Okay, I'm showing slide 73 again. I could use some help making a detailed plan. Okay, maybe it was 69 and 70. So if it was 69 and 70, this was the crucial clauses recap that I said would be up there again. Kathy, if you're still on and that wasn't the slide you wanted to see, it's to show the second recap slide. And I did tell, this was the last slide, and I put it in there just because I told you will get an additional you'll get a slide set here so you can watch it. So I just want to go one more time for anyone who's still on the line, repeat what we're offering and the bonuses. If you register for this program, you will have an invitation letter to the first 2-hour module to invite your boss or another colleague of yours so that they can get a certificate for attending the ISO 9001 2015 management briefing if they attend with you. They have to ask for that certificate because it would go through a different system. Let's see, then if you register for this, your registration pays for itself. And I want to reiterate that I said, that was a typo when I said 3 participants. It's 2 participants. So 2 registration fees of whatever the price you paid for registration can be applied to any other consulting or training services of at least 2 days the Desera Group may offer in the future. And then, so if 1 or 2 of your people come, then you can put 1 or 2 people's amount toward that. And then you get to see for yourself so that you can decide if Desera will should come into your company. Let's see, Lisa asks, is there an issue with completing our internal audit spread out over time as opposed to having an internal audit cover everything in a day or 2? No, there absolutely isn't. Some companies like to spread things over time for a variety of reasons, least of which is the load on the internal auditors. You do not have to have an internal audit all in one fell swoop. I'll tell you that when Desera comes in to do when we're the outsourced, the contracted internal auditors, We tend to do it all in one fell swoop, but I have a client locally that wanted to use me, and I said, I don't mind driving over there. We'll have to do it a month at a time for, how my schedule allows. But if you're paying flights or travel expenses for an auditor coming in from outside, you might want to have it done all at once. There are advantages to doing it both ways. Do it all at once. Everyone gets their marching orders and goes forward. Doing it over a period of days or even a month or more, you've spread out the changes that you need to make, and you may have different audit trails that you want to pursue based on information that's come out in the business. So you can spread that out as you see fit. Okay, so you'll if you register early, you get the office hours, you get the bonus class, and once again, you should have gotten the all this information that you need to show your leader. If you're still here with me, I want to tell you one last thing. When you download, I did tell you that you were going to get your bonus. I didn't put the slide in that said get your bonus. You're going to get it though. Yeah, Teresia caught me on this in my slide deck. I didn't put in, if you stay to the end, click here to get your bonus. It's in there. It's on our webpage, and I'm going to say it right. It's go to deseragroup.com/bonus, and I'll bet you she put that in the chat notes already. But we'll publicize that in the letter that you get. Go to deseragroup.com/bonus, and it's lowercase bonus, isn't it? Lowercase bonus to get your talking points to share with your manager. I apologize. I was supposed to do that at the 90-minute mark, but I hope many of you are still with me. Please contact me directly if you have any more questions, and I'm really glad you chose to show up today. This was a blast to put together and deliver to you. And if you know anyone else who might want to see this presentation live, we're doing it again Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Central Time. I hope you'll pass in the registration information. They'll get their own login key, and they can attend the webinar on Thursday. It'll be different from the login for today. Thank you very much for attending, everyone, and I hope to see you in our 6 crucial steps to ISO 9001 2015 success next month. Bye-bye.